Hey everyone, welcome to another video in the implementation series of Halo. Today, again, I have with me my good friend Morgan from Halo. He, as you've heard me mention on every other video, and I know this is going to be a good thing for him, is Mr. Halo. Morgan knows everything there is to know about Halo, and I really appreciate that Halo has let me borrow Morgan again to kind of go through making some of these videos with me. So today we're going to talk about projects. We're going to kind of potentially go over two or three videos talking about everything there is to know about projects, right from creating the ticket template, then going into adding a project from a sales order into milestones, all that kind of stuff. So these may be fairly long videos, but stick with us and we go from there. So Morgan, thank you very much for being with me. I really appreciate your time again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Mr. Halo himself, it's been months you've been saying that, and I'm still not tired of it. So, and I don't think I ever will be. I love it.
Exactly. I'm going to scratch your head from here. You got such a big head now saying that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get out of this room. Now, as you say, we'll do a few videos on projects. There's various different areas to cover here, and we can really sort of break them down into three main aspects, I suppose. So firstly, we're going to talk about creating projects. Then we're going to talk about tracking projects. That's going to include looking at our forecasting, our milestones, our budgets, etc. Then we can have a look at billing for projects and how we sort of bring the sort of the sales flow and sales orders into the conversation of projects. But yeah, a great place to start, of course, is the creation of projects themselves. So we'll cover two aspects of that in this video. We'll start off just by looking at creating projects, from scratch. Then we'll look at how we can apply a sort of general backbone to a project structure via the application of something called ticket templates in Halo PSA. Cool. So I suppose a great place to start here is to actually go into the projects module, right? So let's click into that. And really, when we're thinking about projects in Halo PSA, the first thing what you want to come to mind is the concept of parent-child relationships for tickets. So what I mean by that is, broadly speaking, a project is going to be composed of a project ticket that's going to be allocated to the project manager, where they can track budgets, timelines, resource allocation, all of that stuff. That would be the parent ticket. And then underneath that will be a series of project tasks that will be assigned to individual members of the project team as a whole. And each of those tasks will be regarding some specific piece of work that's going to be required to complete the project on a whole. So when you spin a trial up, you'll find some configuration sort of baked in to handle this scenario. So what we'll do is we'll start off just by creating a project, and we'll do that by clicking new in the top right of our projects area, where by default we've got our ticket type set as projects. So now I'm not going to worry about the budgets just yet. We will cover those in an upcoming session, as mentioned. But for this video, what I want to highlight is how within our project ticket type, we have the ability up here to create a task. So, maybe if I actually just give this some more meaningful information, maybe I want to say like server migration. Let's say this is a server migration project. Now, the server migration project might be composed of backing up the old server, decommissioning the old server, and uploading the backup to the new server, something like that. So if I could just, those can be thought of as three tasks, right? So I'll click create task at the top here, and that's opened up the the new task screen, the new ticket screen on the right-hand side, or I might want to say decommission old servers.
So with the tasks, the project tasks, Morgan, these are basically essentially just tickets, right? So these are the same as you would get in a just in a normal service desk ticket, but just kind of specifically related to a project.
Yeah, exactly. The sort of the fundamental logic, as you say, is these are tickets. They are tickets of a certain type, namely projects and project tasks, and they are also tickets of a certain use, namely projects. So we'll take a look at what that means in just a moment, but there is some special configuration specific to tickets of use projects. But before I do that, let me just go ahead and create this task. Decommission old server.
And I think this would be familiar to most users or people coming over from other PSA tools, because they kind of call them the exact same thing. So
yeah,
a project task is effectively a ticket, but a ticket specifically with certain criteria that kind of links into a project and has other things it can do that a normal ticket can't. But for all intents and purposes, it's a ticket, but it's a project ticket.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah, so let me just set my start date and my target date, my end date for this particular task, to submit that. And then what we'll find is we'll have a tasks tab pop up on our project, where we can see the task that we've just created. Now, of course, in this case, we've only got the one task, but you can imagine an actual project may have, 20, 30 tasks against it. So yeah, let's just take a quick step back and let me further answer that question that you had there about whether these are just tickets or not. So what I mean by the fact they are tickets of a certain type is, if we were to go to configuration ticket types, we'll see in here that project and project task are in our list, just like our incidents and our problems and our change requests are. What is different, of course, one thing that's different is the field list, where we're capturing different bits of information for our project that we're not concerned with when we're talking about incidents, like, SLA priority, for example, is not going to be applicable for a project, but the budgets will be. So we've got that defined field list, but what we also have in our details tab is this use section. So this use section of projects provides us with some special configuration specific to project management in Halo PSA. And one of those features is the budgets functionality. Again, something that we will cover in an upcoming session. Another fairly important point, I suppose, when talking about the use of a ticket type, we'll remember way back when we were having a look at our organization setup and specifically our team configuration. We'll see that teams are used for tickets, used for projects, and used for CRM. So those ticket types that have use of project, we can refer to those as project types. If the team that you have configured is not marked as user projects, then tickets of use project, in this case projects and project tasks, cannot be assigned to any of the first line support team. Now, of course, an agent can be a member of the first line support team and the projects team, but those tickets will only be able to be assigned to the projects team and the agents within those. So another handy point to keep in mind.
And that makes sense, because typically you would not necessarily need your first line support guys to work on project tickets, but you may have a dedicated project team that is going to be able to work on tickets. And they may be the same person, but maybe, while you're doing your first line support roles, you may have a split role or something, and then you'd kind of do projects as part of that. So yeah, so that makes perfect sense. Allowing it only to be visible and assigned to on a specific team.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so I mean that's the premise of how we're working on projects, and that is the very broad structure of how projects are composed in Halo PSA. We've got a parent project ticket, and we have a series of child tasks. Now, of course, you can add the create task option into your project task. So we could add create task in here, or perhaps create subtask, and we can have multiple layers, so we can have grandchildren as well. That's not something that's uncommon, but again, the logic is the same. You have your parent ticket, your top level parent or grandparent ticket that's going to be allocated to the project managers, where they're going to be tracking the forecasting, the resource allocation, and the budgets, and then the actual day-to-day activity that's performed in order to drive the project towards completion will be done via our individual project tasks. And when we take a look at tracking projects, we're going to see all sorts of different mechanisms available in Halo PSA to allow PMs to see how far along the journey or how far towards completion is a project, based on the status of our individual project tasks or the amount of time has been allocated to them against the budgeted time and so on. But let's not put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I mentioned, we've got parent projects and child tasks. Now, what I just did there is I created one task against the project. That wasn't very labor intensive. But you can imagine there's going to be way more tasks for a server migration. You can imagine a larger project may have north of 40 tasks against it. And for the most part, those tasks are going to follow a very similar format, right? If you're migrating a server, chances are you're always going to be decommissioning the old server, or 90% of the time you're going to be decommissioning the old server. So we can, at least to some extent, consider certain types of projects as following a template, having a similar backbone structure to them, which of course will diverge slightly from one project to the next. But for that 85% of tasks that are going to be created, they will be the same task, or they'll have similar details against them. And that's where ticket templates come in Halo PSA. So ticket templates allow you to create tickets in Halo with some predefined information allocated to them. So let's go and take a look at our ticket template configuration.
And this is the same again.
So for that, we'll go to the configuration module. Sorry, Chris.
No, sorry, I was going to say, I think there's a bit of a delay on our line, which is fine. This is everything you mentioned here is pretty much going to be very, very familiar, I think, to anyone that's coming over from another PSA tool, because project templates are big things in the other PSA tools out there.
Yeah.
We're exactly the same thing, right? You create all of those tasks that you're going to need on that particular type of project. So always going to decommission a server, always going to reinstall the operating system, always going to plug in a drive, whatever it is. You're always going to do those steps. And like you say, you don't want to have to go manually and create those tasks every single time if they're always going to be the same. So I think, yeah, the concept of templates, especially anyone who's come from one of the big two other PSA tools, should be fairly familiar with how and why you need to have templates. So, but yeah, it's good to see how we do that in Halo.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so those are found in the tickets area of configuration, where we have our templates module. Now, it's worth noting the ticket templates, more generally speaking, can be applied to any ticket type. So we might have an onboarding ticket type, a new starter ticket type that's actually got a series of tasks against it. Now, that might not be considered a project, that might be considered a service request, but you're still going to have a series of tasks created associated to that service request to, create the user and all of that stuff. So our templates can be applied to all ticket types, but they are very useful for projects for the exact reason that Chris just mentioned.
So I actually use templates just in ordinary tickets as well, right? So because I have my consulting ticket that is always the same. It always has the same information in it, always has the same fields that need to be filled in. And, again, I don't want to have to create that ticket and fill all that stuff in every single time I create the ticket. So I just built a template that, when I go into that particular type of ticket, in my case, consulting, it then pre-fills in all that information for me. So I don't have to type it in.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Cool. So let's go ahead and create a new template. I don't think we've got a server migration in here. So let's create a server migration template. So firstly, we'll give it a name. Now, the values tab of our ticket template is where we actually predefine that information that is going to be used when this template is applied. So I'll go to the values tab. We'll see in here, this is where we have all of those fields that we can preset, right? So I want to have this ticket type be a project. So I can just pick project. I can predefine a summary. Worth noting as well that dollar variables can be used in here. So I might want to put the dollar area variable in, which will return the customer name, and just say server migration. And then we'll put the same thing in our details. Allocate a status, assign it to a team, and potentially an agent. I'll leave it as unassigned for now. And then some more miscellaneous information below, do we want to set a default category in this case? Do we want to apply a default workflow, set up an approval, all of that good stuff. Now, next up, before we go on to the children tab, let's just have a quick look at our to-do list tab. So to-do lists are just checkboxes that need to be checked off in order to close the ticket. So this can be quite handy just as make sure that you follow these steps when you are decommissioning the old server, for example, or if you are restoring the backup onto the new server, make sure you've done X, Y, and Z. If you are backing up the old server, make sure that you've done X, Y, and Z. So they're quite handy ways of just providing a checkbox list of small items that need to be completed in order to close the ticket. Now, that in order to close the ticket point comes with a slight asterisk because that is contingent on an option in the general ticket settings. So if you go to config tickets, general, we have here whether or not we're going to enforce those to-do list items to be completed before closing a ticket. So it's up to you how you go forward with it. I mean, you can put those to-do list items on there as a subtle reminder, but if you don't necessarily want them to enforce, you don't want to enforce agents to click those, then you don't have to. I would probably, if I was going to use the to-do list, I would probably enforce my team to make sure they're all clicked, because what's quite nice as well is those clicks are all audited in the database, meaning if I say that X, Y, and Z needs to be done on a task, the agent can't close the task until they have clicked X, Y, and Z, and we can see that those have been clicked. And then, of course, if the corresponding work hasn't been done, you can follow up with your team as to why it hasn't, or if there was some confusion or whatever. So yeah, it's just sort of aiding towards that accountability and making sure that your projects are watertight.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I do the same thing, and every MSP I speak to when I do consulting is to say, you should have checklists even on the most basic of tasks that people have done a 1,000 times, because we're all human and we're all going to forget, right? So it's always that good thing to go, yep, I've actually done that. Yes, I have reset the password. Yes, I have done the 2FA. Yes, I have done all these things. Even though I've done it 1,000,000 times, we all get busy, and it's so easy to forget. And I think a lot of people that I speak to say, well, I don't need it on that kind of task because we do it 100 million times. And but then, then you ask them the next question of, okay, well, have you ever forgotten to do that task? And the answer is very often, yes, we have. I'm like, okay, well, that's the reason you should be then putting in a to-do list, so that even if you've done it a million times, you can still tick to say you've done it, which reminds you. And as you say, it's then audited as well. So
exactly. And if we're talking about something security related, all it takes is one mistake and you can have some serious problems. And yeah, I get it. It's exactly the same internally in Halo. We've got to-do lists for our projects, and it's really annoying because it's, oh, I've already done this. Why do I have to check this? But that drills into your mind that you have to do it. And if they weren't there, then like you say, I speaking for myself, I certainly would have forgotten to do some core aspects of an implementation. So yeah, it's a nice subtle reminder of exactly what needs to be done, and making sure that that's interactive as well, by prompting the checking of those items. So not so important for the project, but let's just put a couple of serious items in here. Let's say review timeline with customer, get sign off, get customers. Now, what's also quite nice with these is you can imagine that you might have a server migration, right? And a lot of those tasks, reviewing a timeline is going to be applicable for everyone, but there might be some checklist items that are only applicable to certain customers that have certain server configurations. So we can actually make our to-do lists dynamically visible based on the customer that the ticket or template is being raised for. So that's quite a nice one as well. This is something that before this was implemented, this came up all the time. It was like, well, yeah, okay, we've got a bunch of to-dos that we want to make sure our agents are completing, but those to-dos are subtly different from one customer to the next. How can we handle that? And this is how you handle that now, by adding your customer restrictions in. So namely, this to-do list item would only be visible if the ticket was logged for Ron's Ironworks.
Yeah, and this is especially for our friends, in the US who deal with a lot of kind of medical, over here we mainly have the NHS and things like that. But, when you got doctors and dentists and what have you that they're dealing with, there may be specific security things that they have to check, being that it's a medical practice, which they wouldn't have to check if it was a marketing company or an HR company or something like that. So that's where this is really going to come in handy, by saying, okay, these sets of customers, we absolutely have to make sure that this is ticked off.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. We'll leave that.
Cool.
So now we get on to why ticket templates are so useful for projects, and that is via the Children tab. So not only can our ticket templates predefine the information on one ticket, we can actually have a series of child tickets that are automatically created with predefined information on them as well. So let's have a look at how we achieve something like that. So on our Children tab, we've got a table of contents. This table will be filled out with a list, namely a list of child tickets. So let's add in here a new child template, and let's call this one decommission old server. Now, again, we see the same tabs that we just saw a moment ago. We've got our values tab where we're specifying the information against this ticket that's being logged. Now, this time we don't want to raise a project, but instead we want to raise a project task. And then we'll just call that D. We'll do $area decommission old server. Yeah. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention that I'm quite a big fan of. I haven't seen used widely enough, in my opinion. Is you can actually attach knowledge base articles to your templates. So, you might have a KB article on the general procedure to follow when decommissioning an old server that gives an outline of, step by step what you need to do and what you need to check for it, and, any sort of common errors, anything like that. So you can create your KBs and then attach your KBs to these templates. So, yeah, that's quite a handy little point that I wanted to mention there.
Just a question, and I've been asked this before, and so it'd be useful to get your take on this, is are those available if you've got your KB articles in a third-party documentation tool? Those are not going to link to that tool, although you could probably put a link to it inside this article to that third-party. Yeah. Which the way I do.
Unfortunately not. We're working on KB syncing from documentation platforms to Halo, but currently the articles that you saw in that list are Halo KB articles. But again, you're absolutely correct. You can put a link in here. So we could say, like, click here for related document in IT glue or something. And then we can just highlight that and insert our link here.
Yeah. And actually that's although nowadays obviously Autotask has the integration with IT glue, so that's available using IT glue stuff directly in Autotask, sure, because they obviously own that product, but it actually wasn't like that until very recently, where it had to be exactly the same as this. Even with IT glue, you had to build the document in in Autotask and then link it into sorry, I didn't mean to bring an Autotask into a thing, but it's just because people are coming in from those tools and wanting to know this stuff, and it's
no,
this is the way.
Actually, no, I mean, but like, don't. I think everyone here watching knows the other big PSA vendors in the space, and it's quite important to make sure that while we're going through this series, people watching this have an understanding of the things that do align and don't align. The naming conventions that work very well, and the naming conventions that need to be shifted. So, like, when we were looking at ticket types versus ticket categories in Halo, that's a great example of making sure that people have a solid understanding of the fact that they are totally different. They're almost the opposite in Halo than they are in Autotask. So it's important to make sure that people have an understanding of how the different tools are similar and different in their own regards.
Okay.
Cool. Anyway, we'll carry on. So this time I'll pick my team to be project consultants. We'll leave that as unassigned. Save this. And just for the sake of timekeeping, I'm just going to create one more task. But of course, you can imagine creating many tasks in here. And I'll touch on that in just a moment. But yeah, before we do that, let's say decommission old server, and let's say restore backup. So we'll give that the name. Again, we'll make our value, we'll make our ticket type, project task. Project consultants. And then I might want to put some to-dos specific to our restore backup on new server. So of course, we can put to-dos on both the parent project and each of the individual children respectively. So you've got a unique list of things that need to be done or need to be checked off based on whatever it is that you're doing. So make sure backup file transfers.
In the old days, you would have said, make sure you put the tape into the into the tape drive before you do the restore.
That's that's before my time.
Exactly, way before your time, mate.
Cool. Yeah, and now the reason that I wanted to create two here was just to highlight one final point, but an important point nonetheless, of our ticket type configuration, primarily useful to projects. And that is, you know, so we've understood the concept of using these templates to predefine information for the project and for a number of tasks. But what people probably want in practice is tasks to be created at certain times, right? They don't want every task to be created at the same time, or maybe they do, but you know, let's say they don't. Let's say that you want your restore backup on new server to only be created after the decommission old server is being closed off. So by doing this, we can sort of start to build a procedure for the project via our template application. We can start to think about, you know, what is contingent on these tasks being created, and so what conditions need to be satisfied for these tasks to be created. Maybe some other tasks need to be closed off, or maybe some other tasks, you know, some other condition needs to be met. So we can do that by adding to our rules. So we see a column here, we've got number of rules. So I can add in here. And now what we have at this point is a number of different conditions. So the top condition is sort of the example that I'm talking about, where we're saying only raise our restore backup on new server task when our decommission old task has been closed off. Now, that's interesting. Maybe I need to save first. Let's go. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's just because I hadn't saved yet. It didn't know that actually existed. So after we save, then we can add our creation rules in. So yeah, saying here that we need to ensure that a particular task is closed before our restore backup on new server is created, and then we can pick our decommission old server. We'll see here, we've got a series of other options. So it might be after some given time has elapsed. It might be after a particular action has been performed, after the status has changed, or perhaps even based on the values of some single or multi-select custom fields. So you can get really creative in terms of defining exactly what needs to happen in your project for each individual task or set of tasks to be raised. So you can start to sort of think about creating not necessarily your milestones, but we could call them milestones, or we could call them phases of our project via the application of these rules, where we have a set of tasks raised, and then all of those tasks need to be closed off. And once they're all closed off, then another set of tasks are raised, and so on and so forth. Or we can have tasks created on single or multi-select options. This is quite a nice one that maybe we'll come back to, where perhaps we want, perhaps we have a checkbox on our project that says project admin required. And if that checkbox is checked, then a project admin task is created. So we might come back to that when we start taking a look at some more sort of start to end examples of tracking projects in Halo. But yeah, for now, just know that these rules are here. They're a very powerful mechanism, allowing you to determine when particular tasks are raised from projects. Cool. So that's the creation of our ticket templates. Finally, let's have a look at how we actually apply them to our tickets. So there are various different ways to apply our templates. To keep this video as short as possible, I'm just going to talk about one to start with, and that is going to be applying a template from the new ticket screen. So we'll go back to our projects area. We'll click new. And we'll see at the top here, we have our apply a template option, where in here we have our server migration template that we've just created. So I'll click on that and I'll use that. and notice how the information that we've defined, namely the summary and details and ticket type, have all been preset for us. Submit that. And we're going to see that our project has been created with our to-do lists automatically added in. And not only that, but the task will also, well, the one task that we didn't have any creation rules for will be automatically created for us. So we see one task in here, decommission old server. And then I can go in here, notice again how our predefined information has come in with our link to our document. And in this case, it's a link to Google, but of course you can put your own links in. And then when we close this off, and go back to our parent, namely back to our project.
And then your other task appears at that point.
We're going to see that second task has been automatically created for us.
Yeah. And that's nice because actually on the other, or some of the other PSA tools, all the tasks get created at the same time. And then you kind of have dependency tasks where you can say, you know, this one, we can't start this task until the one above has been completed. But they all get created at the same time. So this is kind of quite nice that, you know, we're not even gonna be able to see that task for the restoring backup until we've decommitted, because we don't need to see it at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it is worth mentioning that scenario for the individuals coming from other PSA platforms that are looking to keep that functionality. Halo can handle that as well. If we go back to our template,
yeah, if we just don't set that that rule, then it'll just show them both at the same time.
Well, no, so what I was going to say is what we've done there is we've applied a creation rule, which means the restore backup did not exist until the decommission old server was closed off. Sure. Which I like, but I appreciate that people coming from other tools have different ways of working, and they don't want to lose that functionality perhaps. So what I wanted to highlight was that within our template value tab, we have this checkbox creating a read-only state. So if we check this, what we can then do within our rules is, instead of making our rule a creation rule, we can make it an unlock rule. Now again, do that based on the closing of the decommissioning old server. And also want to make sure that that is removed. There we go. And so what that will do is that will create both tasks at the same time. So, you know, people are more, that's more familiar with other tools. And also, I suppose the flip side of that is people will be able to see the full set of tasks that do need to be completed eventually. It's just nothing can happen on them until some condition is met. It's like what you're referring to with these dependencies. But by using an unlock rule instead of a creation rule, what we find is both of those tasks are going to be created for us. However, the second task, the restore to new server, will not allow us to perform any actions on that task. So we see here now both have been created at the same time. But in our restore backup task, we're not going to have the ability at the top to perform any actions because the conditions that we're referring to have not yet been met. So, you know, as with everything in Halo, there's a configuration option for it. So whichever way it is you'd rather work, the chances are Halo is going to be able to do that for you.
And this is nice. This is the way I would work, because for me, I want to see all of the tasks. I want to be able to kind of say, you know, because I know what then is coming up. I don't want to kind of get a surprise and suddenly go, oh, now I've got to do that task. I'd rather kind of see them all. But like this, yeah, there's no point me going to restore the backup on the new server if I haven't decommissioned the old one, and indeed I haven't installed the new server. But I still want to know that it's coming up, and I want to know that, you know, when it's coming up, so I can kind of make some plans and you know, make sure I've got the resources available to do that. So cool, that's really cool. Yeah, there's some really cool options in there.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that's a good point to wrap up here. Obviously, there's plenty more to talk about in projects, but for the sake of keeping the video to a sensible length, yeah, we'll wrap this up here. This should give you some insight into how you can use these ticket templates to create your fundamental project structure for the different types of projects that you're doing on a repeat basis. And we've seen how we can template both the parent project, template all of the tasks, how we can apply to-do lists to projects and to individual tasks, and how we can apply creation or unlock rules to our tasks to determine what work needs to be done where.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. This is a really good, cool place to end this. And the purpose of these videos is not to kind of go into huge, massive detail, but just to give a you know, a high level overview of how these things work. And if, you know, if anyone wants to know more information about, you know, what else we can do with projects, then by all means reach out to me or reach out to Morgan or somebody at Halo who would be happy to help. And what we're going to do on the next video is we're going to talk about you know, how this project creation happens from you know, from doing a quote and then kind of having a sales order and then kind of generating this project from that process. So thank you very much, Morgan. Really appreciate you being on these videos again, as always. And I really appreciate you know, Halo allowing us to do these and allowing us to use so much of your valuable time. So really appreciate it. And thank you very much. And we'll see you on the next video.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and thanks for everyone for watching. So yeah, see you on the next one where we take a look at a different way of creating projects.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers.